what kind of relationship do you have with your father? Your real father. It's often ambivalent, right? Because there's an element of him that encouraged you, hopefully, because without the encouragement of your father, man, the world is a dismal place. It's very difficult to be a courageous person unless you have your father in body and spirit behind you. It's very demoralizing. Like, it really kills people not to have their mother. They just don't recover from that. And I think people can recover from a fragmented father relationship, but it's the next worst thing. You know, because if your father rejects you or doesn't form a relationship with you, it's as if the spirit of civilization has left you outside the walls as of little worth. It's very difficult for people to recover from that. So the father should be an encouraging force, but can be a tyrannical and crushing force. And so that's a very difficult thing to get right, partly because if you're my son, then I should impose the highest standards of behavior on you. And I should always be judging what you're doing. I should be judging it with the aim of making the best in you come forward. But getting that balance exactly right is very difficult. And so it's easy for a father to swing too much into judgment, let's say. And then, of course, mothers can play this role too. To swing too far into the domain of judgment and to be too harsh. And to the degree that the father has his own pathologies, he's going to do that imperfectly. You know, he might be someone who's the father who devours his son because he's jealous of the new possibility, the new potential, the struggle for attention and love from the mother or from the other children in the family. There's all sorts of things that can go terribly wrong. So that's the father as wise king, and that's another symbol that's been lost, I would say, to a massive degree in modern universities, because all we're taught is to tear that down. And to not even notice that it manifests itself everywhere, especially in the universities, which are like they're as close to an ideal environment as human beings have ever been able to create. It's as simple as that. And if you can't be grateful for the structure of the university with all its imperfections, then you're completely blind to this element of the archetype. And that's the opposite of it. That's the son that devours, the king that devours his own son. That's a tyrant. You know, that's like the mother who's too overprotective. It's the male version of that. And the mother that's too overprotective says, I'll never let anything happen to you. It's like, well, maybe you actually want to have something happen to you. You know, it's a bit of an all-inclusive statement. It's like, no, I'm going to make you strong so any number of things can happen to you. And when you need some care, I'll be there. But otherwise, like out into the world with you. That's the right attitude. And for the father, it's like, get your bloody act together. But I'm on your side. It's not because I want to destroy you or demean you or push you down in the dominance hierarchy, but because I want the best in you to emerge. And so you need standards. It's like, what are you doing wasting your life? There's way more than that to you. Get your act together and bring it out. My father's a tough character, and he's relatively low in agreeableness, especially politeness, and although moderate in compassion. And he's a pretty harsh taskmaster, demanding in terms of his standards. And so he was difficult to please. And that's both a blessing and a curse, you know, because the curse is that he's not pleased, but the blessing is that he thinks you can do better. And so, you know, it's really hard to say when someone's on your side, it's not obvious exactly what that means. It's like, well, are they on the side of who you are, or are they on the side of who you could be? And a lot of what is necessary paternal encouragement, I would say, you know, speaking somewhat stereotypically, is being on the side of who you could be. And I thought this through quite carefully as a clinician, because one of the clinical psychologists who had a major impact, I would say, on me intellectually and practically was Carl Rogers. And Rogers preached, let's say, this doctrine of unconditional positive regard. And he's been criticized for that, because if you actually listen to Rogers, even in his interactions with clients, it was pretty obvious that his positive regard wasn't unconditional. And the problem with unconditional positive regard is, well, you know, you're actually not okay the way you are. And who thinks they are? You know, all of us are perfectly, if we have any sense, cognizant of our imperfections. We also hope we're not all we could be, because, you know, especially if you're suffering miserably because of your ignorance and your willful blindness and your malevolence, you think, God, I hope there's more to me than this. And you really do hope that. And then to have someone who's on the side of the part of you that could yet be better, that's really something. And I told my clients all the time when they came in for therapy, when I made such things explicit, that, we were in a partnership to bolster the part of them that was aiming up, that was aiming at the good. And it was useful for people to partition themselves to some degree into that part that was aiming up and that could be trusted and relied upon as an aid to further growth, and that part that was, bitter and resentful and angry and sometimes homicidal and sometimes worse than homicidal, and that was clearly aiming down in every possible way. And I wanted to be on the side of the better angels of our nature, let's say. And I would say my father was definitely that. And so that was painful in some ways because it was difficult to please him. And he applied the same standards to himself and paid a certain cost for that. But I did know fundamentally that he had my back. And I mean really fundamentally. And I knew that that was not all that common because many of my friends growing up, especially the group of friends I had before almost all of them dropped out of school, so that would have been junior high, they had very contentious relationships with their father that weren't predicated fundamentally on something like a mutual respect. And that was very hard on them, and I suspect also very hard on their fathers. And my father, when my friends used to come over, he cast a dim light on the bunch of juvenile delinquents that I hung around with in junior high, and perhaps for good reason. But they respected him, and they also knew that he was on my side. And so my father gave me an abiding, and then the other thing I should say about him is he spent a tremendous amount of time with me when I was very young, say before I was 5 or 6. He taught me to read. He did that every night for months, and I remember that very vividly, and instilled in me a love of books and a fluency in reading. He believed that I could do what I set my mind to. And he really believed that. And to have someone that believe that of you, that's something, man. And, it was something that I wanted to offer to my clinical clients, because I did believe that there was more to them than the suffering person that was sitting there, and that, with joint, diligent effort, we could sift our way through the chaff and find the wheat, and that things could be better. And one of the lovely things about practicing as a clinician was that almost inevitably happened, and sometimes really radically. And then, of course, later it started to happen on a broader scale, and I was seeing that happen in the lives of maybe thousands of people. And so the kids who lack fathers, first of all, they can find that to some degree in their friends. And that's often what fatherless boys do in particular. They go into gangs, and they generate the missing masculinity in the gang. Well, that's not so good because, what the hell do they know? Yeah. They don't know anything, right? They're just stupid kids, and they're 15 years old, and their testosterone is pumping, and they're trying to get the hell away from their mother, which is what they're supposed to do. And they're not in the right position to exercise any authority over themselves. So that's not good. They can find it in education, they can find it in books, they can find it in movies, they can find it in sports heroes and so forth, because the image of the father is fragmented and distributed among the community. Okay. But it's very, very difficult to not have a father. Right. And one of the things that we're doing in our society, which I think it's absolutely appalling, is that we're making the case that all families are equal. It's sorry, no, wrong. And there's no empirical data supporting that proposition, by the way. It's much better for kids to have 2 parents. Okay. Now, who those parents are, that's a whole different issue. But.
Okay, and if I could just add one more thing. How would you answer that question to, let's say, a daughter who was raised by her father? Because she would obviously have different ways of finding those fragments of her missing father than a boy would instead. Because obviously they're raised differently. At least they should have been.
Well, I think it's the same issue, I think that another danger that emerges, and this is Freud's, of course, famous observation, is that, if there's mom and child, or father and child, that relationship can get a little closer than it should. And then the lines get blurry and mixed. And I'm not saying that happens to everyone, obviously, but it's still a danger that's inherent in the situation. They're thrust together too tightly without sufficient resources. Okay. And so the responsibility has to be distributed more. And I really do think that it's the sign of the degeneration of a society when
that when single parenthood becomes anything approximating the norm. It's not a good idea. And part of the reason I believe that, and I think this has to do with the overwhelming selfishness of modern life, is that marriage isn't for the people who are married. It's for the children, obviously. And like, if you can't handle that, grow the hell up. No, I mean seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. Once you have kids, it is not about you. Period. Now that doesn't mean it isn't about you at all, but that just seems so self-evident to me. I can't believe that anybody would even question it.
Oh, it's been questioned.
Oh yes, well,
horrible.
I'm certainly aware of that. Yes, it's questioned. It's almost illegal to question it now. You know, or illegal to make the set of propositions that I'm making. So that's the best I can do.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Thank you.
Okay.